When you think about it, your body has to do two things that are kind of contradictory. On one hand, it needs to make perfect, exact copies of itself to grow and heal. But on the other, it has to create something totally new for the next generation. So, how on earth does it do both? Well, the answer lies in two master strategies of cell division: mitosis and meiosis. It's a pretty wild question, right? How do you actually go from a single tiny cell to, well, you, with trillions of them? And then, how does that organism get ready to create the next generation? The answer is hiding in two brilliant but very, very different cellular game plans. And this slide just lays it out perfectly. For all the everyday stuff, growth, repair, you need a perfect copy. Think of it like a high-quality photocopier. But for reproduction, you need variety. You need to shuffle the genetic deck. So you've got two totally different goals, and that means you need two totally different processes. Okay, before we dive any deeper, let's get one key idea locked in: diploid. Just think of a diploid cell as having the complete two-volume instruction manual for building you. We call it 2N, and it's the standard setup for pretty much every single cell in your body, what biologists call your somatic cells. And of course, the other side of that coin is haploid. So if diploid is the full two-volume manual, haploid is just volume 1. A haploid cell, which we just call N, has only a single set of chromosomes. These are the specialists, right? They're the reproductive cells, or gametes, things like sperm and eggs. All right, so let's tackle our first process and see how the body actually gets built. Let's talk about mitosis, the body's absolutely incredible cloning machine. So, why does your body even need this cellular photocopier? Well, for a few really critical reasons. First step is genetic stability. You definitely want your new skin cells to be identical to the ones they're replacing. Mitosis is also the engine of growth. It's what takes you from one cell to trillions. And for some organisms, it's how they can regenerate lost parts or even reproduce all by themselves. What's just amazing here is the precision of this four-step dance. First, in prophase, the DNA coils up super tight. Then comes metaphase, and this part is absolutely crucial. Everything lines up perfectly, right down the middle. This perfect lineup makes sure that in anaphase, when the copies get pulled apart, each new cell gets a flawless, identical set. Then finally, in telophase, two new cells pinch off. It's just an incredibly organized system designed to make sure no mistakes are made. And the grand finale of mitosis? You get two brand new, genetically identical daughter cells, and each one is a perfect diploid copy of the original. Job done. Okay, but what if the goal isn't to make a copy? What if the whole point is to create variety? Well, that's where our second process comes in. Let's take a look at meiosis, the variety generator. You see, meiosis has a secret ingredient, a brilliant little trick that generates all the genetic diversity that fuels evolution itself. And like this slide says, it's all about shuffling the deck. And here is that shuffle in action. This process, it's called crossing over. And this is where the real magic happens. Chromosomes that are paired up literally swap pieces of their DNA. They're creating brand new combinations of genes that have never, ever existed before. This is the absolute engine of genetic variation. Now, this first big division, meiosis 1, is where all the really unique work gets done. After that critical crossing over happens in prophase 1, the pairs line up. But here, and this is the huge difference from mitosis, in anaphase 1, the cell doesn't pull apart identical copies. No, it pulls apart the entire paired chromosomes. This is the step that cuts the chromosome number in half, and it's how you create two haploid cells. So after that first really unique division, those two new haploid cells go into a second round, meiosis 2. And this stage is going to look really familiar because it's almost exactly like mitosis. The goal here is just to separate the duplicated strands of the chromosomes that have already been shuffled. It's the final step to create those individual reproductive cells. And what's the final result of this whole two-step dance? 4. You end up with 4 genetically different haploid cells. These are the gametes, each one carrying a totally unique combination of genetic information, all ready for reproduction. Okay, so we've seen them both individually. Now it's time for the main event. Let's put them head-to-head in the showdown, mitosis versus meiosis. This table just brings it all together so clearly. Look at the huge differences. Mitosis gives you 2 identical diploid cells to build your body. Meiosis gives you 4 unique haploid cells for reproduction. One process happens in all your regular body cells. The other only happens in the special cells that create gametes. Their functions are just completely distinct. One is all about stability and growth. The other is about creating the genetic variation that allows species to adapt and survive. It really just comes down to this: 2 different tools for 2 totally different jobs.
So let's zoom out and bring this all home. We've gone from one cell all the way to you. Why does any of this actually matter?
It really all boils down to this single powerful idea. Mitosis is what builds the individual. It carefully and precisely copies the blueprint to create a functioning organism. But meiosis is what ensures the diversity of the entire species, shuffling the deck to give the next generation a totally new hand to play. Which leaves us with one final, pretty important thought. If these 2 incredibly precise processes are the literal blueprint for building and continuing life, what happens when they make a mistake?